The crack of a gunshot echoed across the dusty main street of Carson City, Nevada, in the summer of 1878, causing Charlotte Rose to flinch and drop the sack of flour she'd just purchased from the general store. It wasn't the sound that startled her. Gunfire was common enough in mining towns, but rather how close it had come to her skirts, kicking up dirt merely inches from her polished boots. "My apologies, madam," a deep voice called from the direction of the saloon. "Slippery trigger finger." Charlotte turned, her chestnut hair catching the afternoon sunlight as it escaped from beneath her bonnet. Her green eyes narrowed at the sight of the man sauntering toward her, tall, broad-shouldered, with a swagger that spoke of either confidence or foolishness. His clothes were travel-worn but of good quality, and the pistol he was holstering looked well-maintained. "You could have killed someone," she said coldly, bending to retrieve her flour, only to find him already there, dust coating his leather chaps as he knelt. "I assure you, miss, I don't miss unless I mean to." He handed her the sack, a smile playing at his lips beneath a neatly trimmed mustache. "Jackson Forrester, new in town." Charlotte accepted the flour without returning his smile. "Mr. Forrester, in civilized places, men don't discharge firearms in the middle of town." "Is that what this is?" He looked around the bustling street with exaggerated surprise. "Civilized, more so than wherever you've come from, apparently." She tucked the sack under her arm, preparing to leave. "Wait." He touched the brim of his hat. "Let me make it up to you. Dinner, perhaps?" Charlotte laughed, the sound as dry as the Nevada desert. "You're wasting your time." The cowboy's smile didn't falter. "Then it's time well spent." She shook her head and turned away, but not before noticing the determined glint in his blue eyes. "I'll be at the Silver Dollar tomorrow evening," he called after her. "Just in case you reconsider." Charlotte didn't look back, but she couldn't help the slight upward turn of her lips. Carson City had just gotten more interesting, though she'd never admit it aloud. Her walk home took her past the newspaper office where her brother, Daniel, worked as a typesetter. The Carson Daily Appeals offices were small but respectable, much like most of the established businesses in town. The mining boom had brought prosperity, but Charlotte knew better than most how quickly fortunes could change. "Charlotte," Daniel waved from the doorway. At 22, he was 2 years her junior but had always been protective. "I saw what happened. Are you all right?" "I'm fine." Just another cowboy with more confidence than sense. Daniel frowned. "That's Jackson Forrester. Word is he's here on business for the Central Pacific Railroad." Charlotte's interest piqued despite herself. The railroad had transformed Carson City, bringing both opportunity and conflict. Her late father had lost everything fighting against the railroad's expansion, dying broken and in debt 3 years earlier. "All the more reason to stay away," she said firmly. "Just be careful. These railroad men play for high stakes." Charlotte nodded, continuing toward the modest house she shared with Daniel and their ailing mother. Their situation was precarious. Her teaching position at the town school barely covered their expenses, and her mother's medications consumed what little they managed to save. As she approached their home, Charlotte noticed a man in an expensive suit exiting through their front gate. She quickened her pace, recognizing Walter Hammond, the bank manager who had been pressuring them about their mortgage. "Mr. Hammond," she called, forcing politeness into her voice. He turned, his thin face arranging itself into what might have been intended as sympathy but looked more like satisfaction. "Miss Rose, I was just leaving notice. I'm afraid I can't extend your deadline any further. The bank requires payment in full by the end of the month." Charlotte's stomach clenched. "That's impossible. You know our situation. Business is business, Miss Rose. Your father's debts must be settled." He tipped his hat. "Good day." Charlotte stood frozen, watching him walk away. 3 weeks. They had 3 weeks to come up with money they didn't have. The school term had ended, and summer meant no teaching income until fall. Daniel's salary wasn't enough. They would lose the house, their last connection to their father. With a deep breath, she pushed open the gate and entered the small front yard, forcing a smile as she prepared to face her mother without revealing their worsening circumstances. Inside, Rebecca Rose sat by the window, her once beautiful face now gaunt, hands trembling slightly as they always did since her illness had taken hold. Charlotte sometimes saw glimpses of the vibrant woman who had stood beside her father during his fights against the railroad, but those moments grew rarer. "Was that Mr. Hammond I saw leaving?" her mother asked, voice frail. "Just routine bank business," Charlotte lied, setting down her purchases. "How are you feeling today?" "Better." Another lie from mother to daughter. They both pretended not to notice the deception. "Who was that man who nearly shot you today, Mrs. Perkins from next door came to tell me all about it," Charlotte sighed. "News traveled fast in Carson City. Just a reckless cowboy, nothing to worry about. Mrs. Perkins said he works for the railroad." Charlotte began unpacking groceries more forcefully than necessary. "Then he's definitely someone to avoid." Her mother studied her face. "Not all railroad men are like those who fought your father, Charlotte. They took everything from us. Your father made his choices." Rebecca's voice carried a rare firmness. "Don't let bitterness narrow your path." Charlotte softened. "I'm not bitter. I'm realistic." That evening, after her mother had gone to bed, Charlotte sat at the small desk in her room, meticulously going through their accounts by lamplight. The figures didn't change, no matter how many times she recalculated. They needed a small miracle to keep their home. A soft knock at her door revealed Daniel, his young face solemn in the dim light. "I heard about Hammond's visit," he said. "How bad is it?" Charlotte showed him the numbers. "We're $300 short even if we sell Mother's silver." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "I could ask for an advance at the newspaper. You've already done that twice this year." Charlotte closed the ledger. "There has to be another way. There's talk of a poker tournament at the Silver Dollar next week. Big stakes." Charlotte looked at him sharply. "Absolutely not. Gambling is what started Father's troubles." "I'm not Father," Daniel protested, "and I'm good at cards. Not good enough to risk what little we have left." Charlotte stood, indicating the conversation was over. "We'll find another way, I promise." The next morning brought no divine inspiration, only the harsh reality of their situation. Charlotte visited several merchants in town, inquiring about additional work, but summer was a slow season. By late afternoon, she found herself standing outside the railroad office, staring at the sign with a mixture of resentment and desperation. The Central Pacific had brought prosperity to many in Carson City. Perhaps they owed something to the families they'd ruined along the way. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door. A clerk looked up, surprised to see a young woman entering the typically male domain. "May I help you, miss?" "I'm looking for work," Charlotte said directly. "I understand the railroad sometimes needs clerical assistance." The clerk looked uncomfortable. "We don't typically employ women, but we might make an exception for someone with proper qualifications." The voice came from behind her. Charlotte turned to find Jackson Forrester leaning against the doorframe of an inner office, watching her with interest. "Mr. Forrester," she acknowledged coldly. "Miss Rose," he smiled. "What a pleasant surprise." "You know each other?" the clerk asked. "We've met," Charlotte replied before Jackson could elaborate. "Mr. Forrester nearly shot me yesterday." Jackson winced. An exaggeration, but not entirely untrue. He gestured toward his office. "Please come in. I'd like to hear about your qualifications." Charlotte hesitated, pride warring with necessity. Necessity won. She followed him into a modest office lined with maps of the Nevada territory. "Please sit," he offered, taking his own seat behind the desk. "Now, what brings Charlotte Rose to seek employment with the despised railroad?" His directness caught her off guard. "You know who I am. Your father was William Rose. It wasn't a question. He led the opposition against our expansion through the Eagle Valley. Quite effectively, for a time." Charlotte stiffened. "Until your company destroyed him." Jackson leaned forward. "Business conflicts can get ugly, Miss Rose, but the railroad didn't set out to destroy anyone. Your father made some unfortunate investments. After your people cut him off from legitimate contracts," she countered. "That's one perspective." He studied her. "But you're not here to relitigate the past. You need money." The bluntness of his statement made her flush. "I need employment." "There's a difference." "Indeed there is." He sat back. "Can you type?" "Yes." "Familiar with bookkeeping?" "I managed my father's accounts before his death and have kept our household books since." Jackson nodded thoughtfully. "As it happens, my secretary left rather suddenly last week. I need someone organized and literate." Hope fluttered in Charlotte's chest. "And the fact that I'm William Rose's daughter makes me think you're likely intelligent and tenacious." He smiled. "Also probably difficult and opinionated, but I can work with that." Charlotte wasn't sure whether to be offended or flattered. The pay? $15 a week. Hours from 8 until 5, 6 days a week. It was more than she'd made teaching. Enough to save their home if she started immediately. "When would you need me to begin?" "Tomorrow morning." He extended his hand across the desk. "Do we have an agreement?" Charlotte hesitated only briefly before shaking his hand. His grip was firm, his skin warm and calloused a working man's hand despite his position. "Tomorrow morning," she confirmed, withdrawing her hand quickly when the contact lingered. As she stood to leave, he added, "My dinner invitation still stands. The silver dollar at 7. Charlotte paused at the door. "I'll be working for you, Mr. Forrester, that's all." His smile never faltered. "Then I'll see you at 8 tomorrow, Miss Rose." As she left the railroad office, Charlotte felt oddly unsettled. She'd secured employment that could save their home, but at what cost to her pride? And why did Jackson Forrester's smile affect her so? That evening, as she explained her new position to her mother and brother, their reactions couldn't have been more different. "The railroad," Daniel exclaimed. Father would want us to keep this roof over our heads," Charlotte interrupted firmly. "It's temporary until we're on solid ground again." Her mother simply observed her with knowing eyes. "This Jackson Forrester, what sort of man is he? Arrogant, overconfident." Charlotte busied herself with mending. "But he's offering fair wages for honest work." "Mrs. Perkins says he's quite handsome," her mother remarked innocently. Charlotte stabbed her needle through the fabric with unnecessary force. "I hadn't noticed," Daniel snorted. "You're a terrible liar, Charlotte." "It doesn't matter what he looks like," Charlotte insisted. "This arrangement is purely professional." That night, she lay awake, wondering if she'd made the right decision. Working for the very company that had contributed to her father's downfall felt like betrayal. Yet the practical side of her, the side that had kept her family afloat these past 3 years, knew it was their best option. Morning came too quickly. Charlotte dressed carefully in her best work dress, a navy blue cotton that was modest yet flattering. As she pinned her hair into a neat arrangement, she reminded herself that appearances mattered in business. The fact that Jackson Forrester might appreciate her efforts had nothing to do with her choices. The railroad office was already busy when she arrived, precisely at 8. Jackson emerged from his office as she entered, looking far more polished than he had in their previous encounters. His suit was well tailored, his hair neatly combed, though a rebellious lock fell across his forehead. "Miss Rose," he greeted her. "Right on time. Allow me to show you to your desk." The workspace was small but orderly, positioned just outside his private office. A typewriting machine sat prominently on the desk, newer and more expensive than the one at the newspaper office. "Have you used this model before?" he asked. "No, but I'm a quick learner." "I don't doubt that." He showed her the filing system, the correspondence that needed attention, and the schedule for the day. "Any questions?" Charlotte glanced at the substantial pile of work. "Why did your previous secretary leave so suddenly?" A flicker of amusement crossed his face. She received a marriage proposal and decided domesticity suited her better than commerce. "I assure you, Mr. Forrester, you needn't worry about that happening with me." He laughed outright. "Somehow, Miss Rose, I never assumed you were in danger of prioritizing domesticity." The morning passed quickly as Charlotte familiarized herself with her duties. Jackson spent most of his time in meetings, returning to the office around noon. "Have you eaten?" he asked, finding her absorbed in organizing a chaotic collection of land survey documents. "I brought something," she replied, indicating a small cloth-wrapped package. "Nonsense. Let me take you to lunch. We can discuss the transcontinental project while we eat." Charlotte hesitated. "Is that appropriate?" "It's business," he assured her, though his eyes suggested otherwise. "The restaurant across the street has private dining rooms for professional conversations." Against her better judgment, Charlotte agreed. The restaurant was indeed respectable, and the private dining room contained a large table clearly meant for business meetings. Still, when they were seated alone, the setting felt more intimate than she had anticipated. "You're adapting quickly," Jackson commented as they were served. "Those survey documents have been a disaster for months." "They were filed by date rather than location," Charlotte explained. "It makes more sense to organize them geographically since that's how they're referenced." "Precisely my thought, though Jenkins insisted his system was superior." He studied her. "You have a logical mind, Miss Rose." "I was raised to believe women are just as capable of rational thought as men, Mr. Forrester." "A progressive notion," he smiled. "One I happen to share." Their conversation shifted to railroad business. Charlotte was surprised by how readily Jackson shared information about ongoing projects, including the challenges and controversies. "The connection between Carson City and Reno has been problematic," he explained, spreading a map between them. "The terrain through Washoe Valley presents engineering difficulties." Charlotte leaned forward, genuinely interested despite herself. "My father always said the eastern route would be more practical, through the Pine Nut Range." Jackson looked surprised. He was right, actually. But the western landowners had more political influence. So decisions were made based on money rather than merit. Often the case in business and in life. He rolled up the map. "Your father was a formidable opponent, Miss Rose." He understood both the practical and political aspects of railroad expansion. The sincere respect in his voice caught Charlotte off guard. "Then, why did your company destroy him?" Jackson's expression grew serious. "The Central Pacific didn't target your father specifically. He positioned himself against powerful interests and took financial risks that backfired. After your people blacklisted him." "Not my people, Miss Rose. I've only been with the company 2 years." He hesitated. "But yes, the railroad played hardball. It's not something I'm proud of, though I wasn't involved." His admission surprised her. "Yet you work for them now." "The railroad is transforming this country, connecting people and places, creating opportunities. I believe in that vision, even if I don't always agree with the tactics." His conviction seemed genuine, and Charlotte found herself momentarily seeing the railroad through his eyes as a force for progress rather than destruction. "Your idealism is admirable," she said, not entirely sarcastically. "And your loyalty to your father's memory is equally so." He met her gaze directly. "We can disagree about the past while working together in the present, can't we?" Something in his direct blue gaze made Charlotte feel transparent, as though he could see through her practiced composure to the confusion beneath. She looked away first. "I suppose we'll find out," she replied. When they returned to the office, Charlotte was acutely aware of a shift in her perception of Jackson Forrester. He wasn't simply the arrogant cowboy who had nearly shot her, nor was he merely a railroad man to be despised on principle. He was becoming a person complex, intelligent, and disconcertingly attentive to her opinions. The afternoon brought a steady stream of visitors to the office: merchants, landowners, and local officials, all with business concerning the railroad. Charlotte was impressed by Jackson's ability to navigate the various personalities and conflicts, showing both firmness and diplomacy. At 5 o'clock, he emerged from his office as she was preparing to leave. "Successful first day," he observed. "I've already received compliments on how efficiently you handled Parker's complaints." "He just needed someone to listen before addressing his concerns," Charlotte replied. "Most people do." "Wisdom beyond your years, Miss Rose." His smile was warm. "Same time tomorrow, of course." She gathered her belongings. "Good evening, Mr. Forrester." "Jackson," he corrected. "If we're to work together, I'd prefer less formality." Charlotte hesitated. "That seems inappropriate." "Only if we make it so." His eyes held hers. "Think about it, and perhaps reconsider dinner sometime." "Good evening, Mr. Forrester," she repeated firmly, though she couldn't help returning his smile slightly as she left. Walking home through the busy streets of Carson City, Charlotte reflected on the unexpected turn her life had taken in just 2 days. From nearly being shot to working for the very company she'd been raised to despise and finding herself not entirely hating it. Daniel was waiting when she arrived home, his expression troubled. "How was it?" he asked as soon as she stepped inside. "Actually, quite interesting," she admitted. "The work is challenging and Mr. Forrester is—" She trailed off, unsure how to describe him. "Is what?" Daniel pressed. "Not what I expected," she finished. "He spoke highly of father, believe it or not." Daniel's frown deepened. "Don't let him charm you, Charlotte. These railroad types are smooth talkers." "I'm not some naive girl to be charmed, Daniel." Her tone was sharper than intended. "I know exactly what I'm doing." "Do you?" He lowered his voice. "Because Hammond came by the newspaper today. He mentioned he saw you entering the railroad office yesterday. He seemed quite amused by the irony." Charlotte's cheeks burned. "Let him be amused. When I pay off our mortgage with railroad money, he can choke on his amusement." Daniel sighed. "I just worry. These people aren't our friends." "I don't need them to be friends. I just need the wages." She touched his arm. "Trust me, Daniel, I haven't forgotten who I am or what they did." But as she prepared for bed that night, Charlotte wondered if that was entirely true. Jackson Forrester had shown her a side of the railroad she hadn't considered: the vision of connection and progress that drove the enterprise. And he had been nothing but respectful and professional, despite his persistent dinner invitations. Over the following week, Charlotte settled into her new role. The work was demanding but satisfying, and she found herself looking forward to the varied challenges each day brought. Jackson, as she had reluctantly begun to think of him, was an engaging employer, soliciting her opinions and often implementing her suggestions for improving office procedures. They developed a comfortable routine, taking lunch together most days to discuss business matters. These conversations inevitably drifted to more personal topics: his upbringing in Missouri, her education in Sacramento before her family's return to Nevada, books they had both enjoyed, music they appreciated. Charlotte learned that, before joining the railroad, Jackson had indeed been a cowboy working cattle drives from Texas to Kansas. His understanding of the land and its people had made him valuable to the Central Pacific as they expanded west. He wasn't formally educated, but was widely read and naturally intelligent, with a keen interest in engineering and an innate understanding of human nature. For his part, Jackson seemed genuinely interested in Charlotte's perspectives and experiences. He listened attentively when she spoke of her teaching, asked thoughtful questions about her students, and never dismissed her opinions, even when they disagreed, which was often. By the end of the week, Charlotte had earned enough to make their first payment to Hammond. The banker's surprise when she entered his office with the money gave her immense satisfaction. "This is unexpected, Miss Rose," he said, counting the bills. "May I ask how you've come by such funds so quickly?" "Honest work, Mr. Hammond," she replied. "I'll have the remainder by the end of the month, as requested." He peered at her suspiciously. "Word is you're working for the railroad now. Quite a change of heart for William Rose's daughter." "Not a change of heart, a practical decision." She met his gaze steadily. "Will there be anything else?" Hammond smiled thinly. "No, Miss Rose, but do give my regards to Mr. Forrester. I'm sure we'll have much to discuss at the town council meeting next week." Something in his tone made Charlotte uneasy, but she dismissed it as she left the bank. Hammond had always been unpleasant, especially toward her family after her father's downfall. That afternoon, she returned to the office to find Jackson in an unusually somber mood. He had been in meetings most of the day, and when he finally returned, his customary smile was absent. "Is everything all right?" she asked as she brought him the day's correspondence. He looked up, seeming to shake off his preoccupation. "Just politics, Miss Rose, the eternal challenge of the railroad business. Anything I can help with?" He hesitated, then gestured for her to close the door. "What do you know about the town council's position on the new depot location?" Charlotte sat across from him. "Only what everyone knows, that they've been debating between the north and south ends of town for months. The south end makes more sense logistically. It would connect more efficiently with the existing lines and provide better access to the commercial district. But the north end would benefit Hammond and his associates, who own most of that land," Charlotte added, understanding dawning. "This is what the council meeting is about next week." Jackson nodded. "Hammond and his group are pushing hard for the northern route, despite the engineering challenges and additional cost. And you're fighting them." "I'm advocating for what makes practical and economic sense." He ran a hand through his hair, dislodging that persistent lock onto his forehead. "But Hammond has significant influence with certain council members." Charlotte frowned, thinking of Hammond's smug expression earlier. "He mentioned having something to discuss with you at the meeting." He seemed confident. Jackson's expression darkened. "I'll bet he did." He studied her face. "Charlotte, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer." The use of her first name startled her, but the seriousness of his tone prevented her from objecting. "Of course." "Your family's mortgage, it's with Hammond's bank, isn't it?" She stiffened. "How did you know that? It's a small town, and Hammond has made veiled references." Jackson leaned forward. "Has he pressured you about it recently?" Charlotte hesitated, then decided honesty was necessary. "He gave us until the end of the month to pay in full. I made the first payment today. With your earnings from here, it wasn't a question." Jackson's jaw tightened. "That explains a few things." "What things?" "Hammond approached me yesterday. Suggested that my employment of William Rose's daughter might be seen as inappropriate, that it might affect the council's view of my judgment." Charlotte felt her face grow hot with anger. "He's threatening you, because you hired me." Not explicitly. Hammond's too clever for that. Jackson's expression softened as he looked at her. Charlotte, I want to be clear. Your employment here has nothing to do with your father or your family's financial situation. You're excellent at this job. The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in her chest. Thank you. But I don't want to cause problems for you. You're not the problem, he hesitated. But there is something you should know. The Southern Depot proposal, it includes purchasing several properties along the proposed route. A cold feeling spread through Charlotte's stomach. Including ours. Jackson nodded. Your house sits directly in the optimal path. If the council approves the southern route, the railroad would offer fair market value, but we would still have to leave our home. Charlotte stood abruptly. So that's why you hired me. To soften the blow when your company takes our house. No. Jackson rose too, his expression pained. I didn't know about your property's location when I hired you. I only learned yesterday when Hammond brought out the maps. And you expect me to believe that? Charlotte's voice rose despite her effort to remain calm. You knew exactly who I was, who my father was from the moment we met. Yes, but I didn't connect your current residence with the proposed route. He moved toward her, stopping when she stepped back. Charlotte, I wouldn't manipulate you that way. Yet here we are. She fought to keep her composure. Either way, we lose our home, either to Hammond's bank or to your railroad. There may be another solution, if the council approves the northern route. Then Hammond wins and dozens of other families face displacement instead of us. She shook her head. I won't be part of that kind of dealing. That's not what I meant. Frustration edged his voice. I'm trying to find a way through this that's fair to everyone. There is no fair in this situation, Mr. Forrester. Charlotte gathered her belongings. I believe I'll take the rest of the day off. I need to discuss this with my family. Charlotte, please. His voice softened. Don't make assumptions about my intentions. She paused at the door, not turning to face him. My father always said railroad men talk about progress while calculating profit. I should have remembered that. The walk home was a blur of conflicting emotions. Anger at the situation warred with a deeper hurt that Mr. Forrester might have been less than honest with her. Yet another part of her, the part that had spent a week observing his character, resisted believing the worst of him. At home, she found Daniel and her mother in the small sitting room, both looking concerned. You're home early, her mother observed. Is everything all right? Charlotte took a deep breath and told them everything: the depot proposals, their property's location, Hammond's pressure tactics, and her confrontation with Jackson. Daniel's reaction was predictably angry. I told you not to trust him. The railroad has been after our property since Father first opposed them. We don't know that Mr. Forrester knew about our house when he hired me, Charlotte said, surprising herself by defending him. Of course he knew. These people plan everything meticulously. Daniel paced the small room. We should fight this. Get the neighbors involved. The council can't just approve taking people's homes. Actually, they can, Charlotte said quietly, with proper compensation. Her mother, who had been silent throughout the explanation, finally spoke. What does Mr. Forrester say about all this? He claims he wants a fair solution, but what's fair about losing our home? Rebecca Rose studied her daughter's face. You've come to care for him, haven't you? What? No, Charlotte's denial came too quickly. I respect his professional abilities, that's all. Charlotte, her mother said gently, I know that look. I wore it myself once when your father was courting me against my family's wishes. This is nothing like that. Mr. Forrester and I have a working relationship, complicated by these circumstances. Is he an honorable man? Her mother pressed. Charlotte hesitated. I thought so, until today. And now I don't know what to think. Charlotte sank onto the sofa beside her mother. Even if he didn't know about our property initially, he knows now, and his job is to secure that route for the railroad. Then perhaps you should ask him directly what he intends to do about it, Rebecca suggested, before you judge his character. Daniel made a sound of disgust. His intentions are clear enough. The railroad wants our land one way or another. Life is rarely that simple, Daniel, their mother replied. People are more complex than the roles we assign them. The following day was Saturday, normally a workday, but Charlotte had decided to stay home. She needed time to think, to consider her options. By mid-morning, however, a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Jackson standing on their porch, hat in hand, looking somewhat out of place in their modest neighborhood. Mr. Forrester. She kept her voice neutral. This is unexpected. I apologize for the intrusion. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous. May I speak with you? It's important. Charlotte hesitated, then stepped back to allow him entry. Her mother was resting, and Daniel had gone to the newspaper office despite it being his day off. She led him to the small sitting room, acutely aware of the contrast between their home and the elegant office where they usually met. The furniture was worn but clean, the decorations simple but tasteful. Family photographs lined the mantel, including one of her father in better days. Jackson's eyes went to that photograph immediately. Your father, he observed. He has your eyes. Why are you here, Mr. Forrester? Charlotte remained standing, unwilling to invite him to sit. He seemed to accept her coldness. I came to apologize for not being forthcoming about the depot situation, and to tell you I've been working through the night on an alternative proposal. This caught her attention. What kind of alternative? A compromise. A modified route that would spare this row of houses while still connecting efficiently to the existing lines. He withdrew a rolled map from inside his coat. May I? Charlotte nodded, and he spread the map across their small table. It showed the original southern route in black ink, with a new line drawn in red, curving slightly to avoid their street entirely. The adjustment adds some cost, but improves access to the warehouses on Pine Street, he explained. I believe I can convince the board it's worth the investment. Charlotte studied the map, hope and suspicion battling within her. Why would you do this? Jackson met her gaze directly. Because I don't believe progress should come at the expense of people's homes when there are reasonable alternatives, and because... He hesitated. Because I value your good opinion, Charlotte, more than I probably should. The simple honesty in his voice made her chest tighten. The railroad won't just approve this because you suggest it. No, but I have some influence and solid economic arguments. A hint of his usual confidence returned. Plus, I can be quite persuasive when motivated. Despite herself, Charlotte felt a smile forming. So I've noticed. I can't promise success, he cautioned, but I will try, regardless of whether you return to work Monday. The fact that he wasn't using this as leverage to secure her continued employment touched her more than she wanted to admit. Why does my opinion matter so much to you? She asked quietly. Jackson took a step closer. I think you know why, Charlotte. The air between them seemed to thicken. For a moment, Charlotte thought he might reach for her, and more surprisingly, she wasn't sure she would stop him. But the sound of the front door opening broke the tension. Daniel's voice called from the entryway. Charlotte, whose horse is that outside? Jackson stepped back just as Daniel entered the sitting room. Her brother stopped short, his expression darkening at the sight of their visitor. Mr. Forrester, Daniel's tone was ice. What brings you to our home? Jackson greeted him with composure. Mr. Rose. I was just showing your sister an alternative proposal for the depot route, one that would spare your property. Daniel looked skeptical. Out of the goodness of your heart, I'm sure. Daniel, Charlotte warned. It's all right, Jackson said. Your brother has every reason to be suspicious." He turned to Daniel. "I understand your distrust, Mr. Rose, but I assure you my interest is in finding a solution that serves the railroad's needs without unnecessarily displacing families." "And what does this solution cost us?" Daniel demanded. "What's the catch?" "No catch. The railroad pays for the additional engineering and your property remains undisturbed." Jackson rolled up the map. "I should go. The council meets Wednesday. I'll present this alternative then." Charlotte walked him to the door, aware of Daniel watching them closely. On the porch, Jackson paused. "Will you be at work Monday?" he asked quietly. Charlotte considered the question. "Do you still need a secretary?" "I need you." The simplicity of his statement carried weight beyond the professional context. "But I understand if you prefer to sever our association." Charlotte made her decision. "I'll be there Monday. 8 o'clock. Relief crossed his features. "Thank you." He placed his hat on his head. "Enjoy your weekend, Miss Rose." As she watched him mount his horse and ride away, Charlotte was aware of Daniel's presence behind her. "You're going back to work for him?" His voice held disbelief. "Yes." She turned to face her brother. "Because I believe he's being honest about this alternative plan." "You believe him or you want to believe him," Charlotte sighed. "Perhaps both. But we need the income regardless, Daniel, and I'm not naive. If he fails to deliver on this proposal, I'll resign." Daniel studied her face. "You care for him." It wasn't a question, and Charlotte didn't bother denying it this time. "He's not what we thought, not what I thought." "He's still railroad, Charlotte." "Yes, but perhaps that's not all he is." She touched her brother's arm. "Give him a chance to prove himself. That's all I'm asking." Daniel didn't look convinced, but he nodded reluctantly. "For you, not for him." Monday morning found Charlotte back at her desk, the atmosphere between her and Jackson tentative but warming. He briefed her on the work he'd done over the weekend, preparing his presentation for the council. His dedication impressed her. The drawings were meticulous, the cost projections detailed, the arguments compelling. "You've put a great deal of effort into this," she observed as they reviewed the documents. "It matters," he said simply. "Getting this right matters." By Wednesday, Charlotte was as nervous about the council meeting as if she were presenting herself. She had helped Jackson refine his proposal, contributing insights about the neighborhood that strengthened his case for the modified route. The meeting was scheduled for 7 that evening at the town hall. Jackson had suggested Charlotte attend, but she declined, knowing her presence might be seen as inappropriate pressure given her family's interest in the outcome. Instead, she waited at home with Daniel and her mother, the hours crawling by as they imagined what might be happening in the council chambers. Just after 9, a knock came at their door. Daniel opened it to reveal Jackson, his expression unreadable in the lamplight. "Mr. Forrester," Daniel said stiffly. "Come in." Jackson stepped inside, removing his hat. His eyes found Charlotte immediately. "Well?" she asked, unable to wait for formalities. A smile broke across his face. "They approved the modified route. Your home is safe." Relief flooded through Charlotte. She moved toward him without thinking, stopping just short of an embrace that would have been improper. "How?" Hammond was so certain. Hammond miscalculated. Jackson's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. He assumed the council would follow his lead without questioning the costs. "I made sure they had all the information about both proposals, including how much extra Hammond's preferred route would cost the town in infrastructure adaptations." "So logic prevailed," Charlotte said, a smile spreading across her face. "Logic and perhaps a bit of eloquence." His gaze held hers. "I had an excellent teacher in constructing persuasive arguments recently." Rebecca Rose had been watching the exchange with interest. "Mr. Forrester, won't you stay for tea? It seems we have something to celebrate." Jackson looked surprised but pleased by the invitation. "I'd be honored, Mrs. Rose." Even Daniel managed a grudging thanks as they settled in the sitting room. Charlotte prepared tea, her hands slightly unsteady with lingering excitement and relief. When she returned with the tray, she found Jackson engaged in conversation with her mother about Carson City's early days. Rebecca had lived in the area since childhood and had stories about the town's transformation from a small settlement to the state capital. "It wasn't all bad, the coming of the railroad," her mother was saying. "It brought medicine and books and people with new ideas. William knew that. His fight was never against progress itself, just the methods sometimes used to achieve it." "A distinction worth remembering," Jackson agreed, accepting a cup from Charlotte with a smile that made her pulse quicken. The evening progressed with surprising ease. Jackson proved himself an attentive listener and thoughtful conversationalist, drawing out even Daniel with questions about journalism and printing technologies. When he finally rose to leave, the clock had struck 11, and the atmosphere had transformed from cautious acceptance to genuine warmth, at least from Charlotte and her mother. Daniel remained reserved but polite. Charlotte walked Jackson to the door. On the porch, away from her family's eyes, he turned to her. "Thank you for trusting me enough to come back to work," he said quietly. "It meant more than you know." "You proved yourself trustworthy," she replied. "I misjudged you and I apologize for that." "No apology needed. Your caution was warranted given your family's history." He hesitated. "Charlotte, now that this business with the depot is resolved, I was hoping you might reconsider my dinner invitation." In the lamplight, his blue eyes held an earnestness that made refusal difficult. But Charlotte remained cautious. "People would talk," she said. "Your secretary dining with you socially. Then perhaps I should be clear that my interest in dining with you has nothing to do with your position as my secretary." He took a half-step closer. "In fact, if it's a concern, you could always work elsewhere. The newspaper might be happy to have someone with your organizational skills." Charlotte laughed softly. "Are you firing me, Mr. Forrester?" "Jackson," he corrected. "And no. I'm simply suggesting that our professional relationship needn't prevent a personal one, if you're interested." The directness of his approach was both disarming and refreshing. "No games, no pretense. I might be," she admitted, "but I'd need time to consider." "Take all the time you need." His smile was patient. "I'm not going anywhere." As he mounted his horse and rode away, Charlotte remained on the porch, watching until he disappeared into the darkness. For the first time in years, the future seemed full of unexpected possibilities. The following weeks brought a subtle shift in Charlotte and Jackson's relationship. At work, they maintained professional decorum, but there were moments, a lingering glance, a brush of hands as they exchanged documents, a shared smile at some private understanding that hinted at deepening feelings neither had fully acknowledged. Charlotte had not yet accepted his dinner invitation, but they had fallen into the habit of taking longer lunch breaks, sometimes walking through town rather than dining at the restaurant. During these walks, their conversations ranged widely, from childhood memories to dreams for the future. "I never actually wanted to work for the railroad," Jackson confessed during one such walk. They had stopped at the small park near the Capitol building, sitting on a bench beneath a cottonwood tree. "I wanted to build bridges, still do someday." "Why bridges specifically?" Charlotte asked, genuinely curious. "They connect what's separated," he said simply. "Make impossible journeys possible." He smiled at her. "And there's something beautiful about the engineering, the perfect balance of forces, the way each piece depends on all the others." Charlotte was struck by the passion in his voice. "You should pursue that dream." "I will, eventually." His expression grew thoughtful. The railroad is teaching me what I need to know about large-scale construction and financing, but one day I'd like to start my own company. Build bridges where they're needed most, not just where they're most profitable. That's a noble aspiration. What about you? He asked. If money were no object, what would you do? Charlotte considered the question. I'd open a school. A proper one, with a library full of books and science equipment and maps of places the students might someday visit. You miss teaching. I do. She smiled ruefully. Although I've grown rather fond of my current position as well, because of the fascinating railroad documents. His tone was teasing. Among other attractions, she replied, allowing herself a moment of flirtation. His expression softened. Charlotte, it's been 3 weeks since the council meeting. Have you had enough time to consider my invitation? Charlotte felt her heart quicken. The truth was, she had been avoiding giving him an answer, not because she didn't want to accept, but because accepting meant acknowledging how much he had come to mean to her. I have, she said finally. And yes, I would like to have dinner with you, though perhaps not at the Silver Dollar. His smile was radiant. I know a better place. Saturday evening. Saturday would be lovely. That evening, as Charlotte told her mother about her plans, Rebecca seemed unsurprised. It's about time, she said mildly. The poor man has been patient. Charlotte looked at her mother suspiciously. You approve of this? I thought you'd be concerned given his connection to the railroad. I'm concerned about your happiness, Charlotte. Rebecca patted her daughter's hand. And I've seen how you light up when you speak of him. Besides, your father would want you to judge a man by his character, not his employer. Daniel was less enthusiastic but had softened his stance since the council meeting. Just be careful, he warned. Railroad men don't always stay in one place long. Charlotte recognized the legitimate concern behind her brother's warning. Carson City was often a temporary posting for railroad officials, who might be reassigned as projects progressed. She resolved to discuss the matter with Jackson directly, though the thought of his potential departure created an unexpected ache in her chest. Saturday arrived with perfect early summer weather. Charlotte spent more time than usual preparing for the evening, selecting her best dress, a deep green that complemented her eyes, and arranging her hair in a more elaborate style than her usual work-appropriate simplicity. Jackson arrived promptly at 6, looking more polished than Charlotte had ever seen him. His suit was clearly new, his boots freshly shined, but it was the genuine delight in his eyes when he saw her that made Charlotte's breath catch. You look beautiful, he said simply. Thank you. She felt suddenly shy, despite their weeks of daily interaction. You look quite handsome yourself. He offered his arm, and they walked to where his carriage waited. Charlotte was surprised when, instead of heading toward one of the town's restaurants, Jackson drove toward the foothills east of town. Where are we going? She asked, curious rather than concerned. You'll see. His smile was mysterious. I hope you'll approve. After about 20 minutes, they turned onto a small trail that led to a clearing overlooking Carson City. There, to Charlotte's astonishment, was a table set with white linen, silver, and crystal, positioned to capture the spectacular view of the town with the Sierra Nevada mountains beyond. How did you? She began, taking in the elegant setting and the small cluster of lanterns hanging from tree branches. I had some help. Jackson assisted her from the carriage. The hotel's chef owed me a favor, and my friend Thomas has a talent for setting scenes. As if on cue, a man emerged from the trees dressed in a waiter's attire. Good evening, Miss Rose, Mr. Forrester. Dinner is prepared and will be served whenever you're ready. Charlotte laughed with delight. This is incredible. Jackson led her to the table, pulling out her chair with a flourish. I wanted our first real dinner together to be memorable. The meal was exquisite roast duck with cherry sauce, fresh vegetables, and delicate pastries for dessert. The wine was perfectly paired, and the conversation flowed as easily as it always did between them. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Charlotte couldn't remember ever feeling so content. After dinner, Thomas discreetly cleared the dishes and disappeared with the carriage, leaving a second, smaller conveyance for their return journey. "He'll return everything to town," Jackson explained. "I hope you don't mind a more intimate ride back." The smaller carriage had just one seat, meaning they would sit much closer together. Charlotte found she didn't mind at all. "It's perfect," she said honestly. "This whole evening has been perfect." They stood side by side, watching as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear. Jackson's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Charlotte," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped. "Yes." "I've been offered a position in San Francisco. The company wants me to oversee a new bridge project across the bay." Charlotte felt as if the ground had shifted beneath her. Daniel's warning echoed in her mind. "I see. When would you leave?" "That depends." He turned to face her fully. "On what I decide, and on you." "Me?" She looked up at him, confused. "I haven't accepted yet. The project is exciting, exactly the kind of work I've wanted to do, but—" He took both her hands in his. "These past weeks with you have been the happiest of my life. I find myself reluctant to leave, even for an opportunity I've dreamed of." Charlotte's mind raced. "I wouldn't want you to give up your dream." "What if there's a new dream now?" His voice was low, intimate. "One that includes you." The implication of his words sent warmth spreading through her. "Jackson, we've only just begun to know each other." "I know enough." His gaze was steady. "I know you're brilliant and kind and stubborn in all the best ways. I know you fight for what matters and don't back down from challenges. I know being with you makes me want to be better than I am." Charlotte's throat tightened with emotion. "That sounds dangerously close to a declaration, Mr. Forrester." "It's exactly that, Miss Rose." He smiled, though his eyes remained serious. "I'm falling in love with you. Probably have been since you told me I was wasting my time." The memory of their first meeting brought a smile to her lips. "And you said it was time well spent. The best investment I've ever made." He lifted a hand to her cheek. "I don't expect you to have an answer tonight, about your feelings or about San Francisco. But I wanted you to know where I stand before I make any decisions." Charlotte leaned slightly into his touch. "And if I need time to consider—" "Then it's time well spent," he repeated softly. "Whatever you decide." The moment hung between them, fragile and perfect. Then, with gentle deliberation, Jackson leaned down and kissed her. His lips were warm and sure against hers, the contact sending shivers of awareness through her body. Charlotte responded without hesitation, her hands moving to his shoulders as the kiss deepened. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Charlotte knew her answer, though she wasn't quite ready to speak it aloud. "We should head back," she said instead, "before it gets too late." The ride back to town was quiet but comfortable. Charlotte nestled against Jackson's side in the small carriage. The physical closeness mirrored the emotional intimacy that had developed between them, unexpected but increasingly precious. At her door, he kissed her again, briefly but tenderly. "Good night, Charlotte. Thank you for a wonderful evening. Thank you for making it so special." She smiled up at him. "I'll see you Monday. I'll be counting the hours." He touched her cheek once more before turning to leave. Inside, Charlotte found her mother still awake, pretending to read but obviously waiting up for her. "Well," Rebecca asked, setting aside her book, "was it everything you hoped?" Charlotte sank into a chair, her mind still spinning with the events of the evening. "More, but it's complicated." She told her mother about Jackson's offer in San Francisco and his declaration of feelings. "And how do you feel?" Rebecca asked gently. "Confused, excited, terrified," Charlotte sighed. "I think I'm falling in love with him too." "That doesn't sound so confusing." "But San Francisco, Mother. It's so far away. And what about you and Daniel? I can't just leave you." Rebecca reached for her daughter's hand. "Charlotte, listen to me. Daniel and I will be fine. The mortgage is nearly paid now, thanks to your work these past weeks. Daniel's position at the newspaper is secure, and my health." She smiled wryly. "It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. Still, if you love this man and he loves you, don't let fear of change hold you back." Her mother's eyes were wise and kind. "Life is too short for such hesitation, believe me." Charlotte recognized the reference to her parents' own love story, how they had overcome family objections and financial hardships to build a life together. "What if it doesn't work out?" she whispered her deepest fear. "What if it does?" her mother countered. "What if this is the beginning of everything you've never allowed yourself to want?" The question lingered in Charlotte's mind as she prepared for bed. What if this was her chance at a different kind of life than she had imagined for herself? A life with a man who respected her mind, valued her opinions, and saw her as an equal partner. Monday morning arrived with Charlotte no closer to a decision. She dressed carefully for work, anticipating the moment she would see Jackson again, both eager and apprehensive. When she arrived at the office, however, she found not Jackson but a telegram waiting on her desk. It was addressed to her, the paper still crisp from recent delivery. With trembling fingers, she opened it. "Miss Rose, stop urgent business in Sacramento, stop return. Wednesday, stop please, consider San Francisco proposal. Stop yours, J. Forrester." Stop. Charlotte felt a mixture of disappointment and relief. The brief separation would give her time to clarify her thoughts, to decide what she truly wanted. The 2 days passed slowly. Charlotte threw herself into her work, organizing files, responding to correspondence, and preparing reports that would await Jackson's return. In the evenings, she discussed her dilemma with her mother and eventually with Daniel. To her surprise, her brother's resistance had softened considerably. "I've been watching him," Daniel admitted. "How he treats people, how he does business. He's not like the others from the railroad. And it's obvious he cares for you deeply." "What about San Francisco?" Charlotte pressed. "It's so far." Daniel smiled ruefully. "Far, but not impossible to visit. And honestly, Charlotte, I've seen how you light up when you talk about this bridge project of his. You're as excited about it as he is." It was true, Charlotte realized. During their conversations about the San Francisco opportunity, she had found herself fascinated by the engineering challenges, the economic implications, the sheer ambition of spanning the bay. She had even suggested approaches to financing the project that Jackson had noted down with enthusiasm. By Wednesday morning, Charlotte had made her decision. When Jackson arrived at the office, looking tired from travel but pleased to see her, she felt a certainty that had been missing before. "Welcome back," she said, rising from her desk as he entered. "How was Sacramento?" "Productive," he smiled. "But I missed you." The simple honesty of his statement warmed her. "I missed you too." Jackson's expression grew more serious. "Have you had time to think about what we discussed Saturday?" "I have." Charlotte took a deep breath. "When does the San Francisco project begin?" A flash of hope crossed his face. "Next month. They need me there by the 15th. That doesn't leave much time." She met his gaze steadily. "For a wedding." For a moment, Jackson seemed frozen, processing her words. Then joy transformed his features. "Charlotte Rose, are you proposing to me?" she laughed, suddenly light with happiness. "I believe you proposed first in a roundabout way. I'm simply being practical about the timeline." In 2 strides he was before her, taking her hands in his. To be clear, you'll come to San Francisco as my wife." "Yes," she squeezed his hands, "on one condition. Name it, that we return to Carson City occasionally. To visit my family and perhaps to consult on any bridges that need building in Nevada." His smile was radiant. "I promise." He drew her closer. "Charlotte, are you certain? I don't want you to feel rushed, I'm certain." And she was, she realized. More certain than she'd been about anything in a very long time. "I love you, Jackson. I think I have since you told me wasting time on me was time well spent." He laughed, the sound rich with happiness. "I loved you from that first moment when you stood in the street covered in flower dust, glaring at me like I was the most uncivilized creature you'd ever encountered." "You were," she teased, then grew serious. "But you've proven to be so much more than I initially judged." "As have you." His expression softened. "Though I suspected from the start how extraordinary you were." The kiss that followed sealed their agreement, a promise of the partnership to come. When they finally parted, practical considerations returned. "A month isn't much time to arrange everything," Charlotte said. "We could wait, have the wedding in San Francisco." "No." Her decision was firm. "I want to marry here with my family present, my mother especially." Understanding crossed Jackson's face. "Of course. Then we'll make it happen, however simple it needs to be." The news of their engagement spread quickly through Carson City. To Charlotte's surprise, the reaction was largely positive. Even Hammond, when encountered on the street, offered stiff congratulations, though his eyes still held resentment over the depot decision. The wedding preparations consumed the next 3 weeks. Charlotte continued working at the railroad office, though increasingly her duties involved training her replacement, a young man fresh from university, who regarded Jackson with obvious admiration. In the evenings, Charlotte and her mother worked on her wedding dress, a simple but elegant creation of ivory silk, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Jackson secured a small house near the bay in San Francisco and sent Charlotte sketches of the layout, inviting her suggestions for furnishings. Their correspondence during his brief trips back to San Francisco to prepare for their arrival was filled with both practical plans and tender sentiments. Each letter confirmed for Charlotte that she had made the right decision, that this man understood her in ways she had never expected to be understood. The wedding day arrived with perfect early July weather. The ceremony was held in the small church Charlotte had attended since childhood, with Daniel giving her away in their father's absence. Her mother, looking stronger than she had in months, watched with obvious joy as Charlotte and Jackson exchanged their vows before family and friends. "I promise to build bridges with you," Jackson said in his personal vows, "not just of steel and stone, but of understanding and compromise. I promise to see challenges as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles. And I promise to never stop believing that time spent loving you is time well spent." Charlotte's own vows acknowledged their unlikely beginning. "I promise to question my assumptions, to listen before judging, and to remember that the most valuable treasures often come in unexpected packages. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams as you have supported mine, and to never forget that love, like the finest bridge, is built on a foundation of trust and mutual respect." The celebration afterward was held in the garden behind the Rose family home, now secure thanks to Jackson's intervention with the depot plans. Lanterns hung from trees, casting a warm glow as evening fell. Music, food, and laughter filled the air as the newly wedded couple moved among their guests. Near the end of the evening, as Charlotte and Jackson prepared to depart for their brief honeymoon at Lake Tahoe before continuing to San Francisco, Rebecca Rose approached them with a small package. "A wedding gift," she explained, pressing it into Charlotte's hands. "From your father, in a way." Puzzled, Charlotte unwrapped the package to find a leather-bound journal. Opening it, she recognized her father's handwriting, pages of notes, sketches, and calculations. "His bridge designs," Rebecca explained. "He was an engineer before he became involved in politics, you know. These are his ideas for spanning difficult terrain in the Sierra Nevada. I thought perhaps—" She looked at Jackson. "They might be useful to you both." Jackson's expression as he examined the journal was one of genuine admiration. "These are brilliant," he said, tracing a finger over one of the sketches. "Years ahead of their time." "He would have liked you," Rebecca told him softly. "Despite the railroad connection, he would have seen in you what Charlotte sees." The moment was poignant, a bridge of its own between past and future. Charlotte felt tears threatening and blinked them back, unwilling to cloud this perfect evening with sadness. "Thank you, Mother," she said, embracing the older woman. "This means everything." As they climbed into the carriage that would take them to their honeymoon lodgings, Charlotte looked back at the home she had fought so hard to save. It would always be there, she realized, a place to return to remember where she came from. But her future lay elsewhere, with the man beside her. "Having second thoughts?" Jackson asked softly, noting her backward glance. "Not one," she smiled, taking his hand. "Just saying goodbye for now. We'll be back," he promised. "Often enough that your mother will tire of us," Charlotte laughed. "Never, but I appreciate the sentiment." As the carriage pulled away, cheers and good wishes following them, Charlotte leaned against her husband's shoulder. "You know what I was thinking about today during the ceremony?" "What's that, Mrs. Forrester?" The name, so new, brought a fresh surge of joy. "That first day when you nearly shot me. If your aim had been a little better, none of this would have happened." Jackson chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her cheek. "My aim was perfect, Charlotte. I hit exactly what I was aiming for. The dirt near my feet." She asked skeptically. "The attention of the most remarkable woman I'd ever seen." He kissed the top of her head. "And it worked." "You're impossible," she said fondly, "perhaps, but I'm yours." The simple statement contained worlds of meaning, of promise. Charlotte turned her face up to his, and as their lips met in a kiss that spoke of both passion and tenderness, she knew with absolute certainty that their journey together, whether in Carson City, San Francisco, or wherever life might lead them, would indeed be time well spent. 5 years later, Charlotte stood on the newly completed bridge spanning San Francisco Bay, her hand resting on the growing swell of her second child beneath her dress. Beside her, Jackson lifted their 3-year-old son, James, to see the ships passing beneath the massive structure. "Did you build this, Papa?" James asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "I helped," Jackson replied, "but it was many people working together that made it possible, including your mother." Charlotte smiled at the acknowledgement. Her role had evolved far beyond what either of them had initially envisioned. What had begun as occasional assistance with calculations had become a full partnership in Forrester Engineering, the company Jackson had founded 2 years after their arrival in San Francisco. Their wedding gift from Rebecca William Rose's bridge designs had proven invaluable, forming the basis for innovations that distinguished their company from competitors. Charlotte's head for business and Jackson's engineering vision had attracted investors and contracts across the western states. "When's Grandma coming?" James asked, squirming in his father's arms. "Tomorrow," Charlotte answered, smoothing her son's hair, so like Jackson's in color and texture. "Uncle Daniel is bringing her on the train." Rebecca Rose had thrived in the years since her daughter's marriage, her health improving enough that she now made the journey to San Francisco twice yearly. Daniel, now editor of the Carson Daily Appeal, accompanied her when he could, often combining the visits with business meetings in the growing city. "And they'll stay for the naming ceremony," Jackson confirmed. Charlotte nodded. The bridge's official opening was scheduled for the following week, and among the festivities would be the formal announcement of its name, the Rose Passage. It was Jackson's tribute to his father-in-law, whose innovative designs had influenced key aspects of the structure. As they walked along the bridge toward the waiting carriage, Charlotte reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that dusty street in Carson City to this monument of steel and stone, their path had been one of mutual growth and unwavering support. The fears she'd harbored about leaving Nevada had proven groundless. San Francisco had offered opportunities she could never have imagined, not just through Jackson's work, but through her own emergence as a respected business partner and advocate for women's education. The school she had once dreamed of opening was now a reality, funded by their company's success and serving girls from across the city. "Penny for your thoughts," Jackson said, settling James in the carriage and turning to assist her. "I was thinking about time," she replied, taking his hand. "And how well spent ours has been." His smile, still as captivating as it had been that first day, warmed her heart. "The best investment I ever made," he said, echoing words from their courtship, "and it keeps paying dividends." As the carriage carried them toward their home in the hills overlooking the bay, Charlotte leaned against her husband's shoulder, their son chattering between them, their second child stirring beneath her heart. The path ahead would hold challenges. She knew life always did, but they would face them together, building bridges across whatever chasms appeared. And that, she reflected as Jackson's hand found hers, was time well spent indeed.